Welcome back to His Fire for Me and another Frugal Friday.
Frugal Friday.
We are reading the book The Art of Frugal Hedonism, and we are on chapter 23. We are almost halfway through this book.
Wow.
I know. So, Kim, what's this chapter about?
This chapter is titled Swot Up on the History of Work. And that is SWOT, which we just looked that word up, and it seems to be a British word that means study assiduously or fervently.
So we're studying up on the history of work.
Yes.
Okay, let's see
Right.
why.
Even if you couldn't give a rat's belly button for the economy or a goose's toot for having an enviable career, I think I need to use goose's toot more often.
I think we need to go visit Australia. We got some fun words.
Or a goose's toot for having an enviable career. All this talk of deliberately working less might still sit uncomfortably with you. Paid work in our culture is considered both the activity in which most of life will naturally be spent and a virtue. Is this simply the fundamental way of the world, or are there other ways to think about things? How did we arrive at this way in the first place? From the late 16th to 18th centuries, European moral value systems took a heavy remolding by Protestantism, with its emphasis on work as the focal point of life and the road to salvation. Forswearing pleasure and frivolity was encouraged, and the attainment of money was seen as a sign that you were making fine headway into God's good books. Large portions of society have had to work hard for millennia, but now work became something to be pursued for its own noble sake. The Industrial Revolution followed hot on the heels of this shift, and with its gluttonous need for labor to operate its new factories, was more than happy to have religion encouraging a strong work ethic in the poorer classes. A fervor for progress became the motif of the newly respectable merchant class and was celebrated in media and morality alike. In 1783, industrialist Josiah Wedgwood, the man behind the crockery, embodied the spirit of the age by applauding well-directed and long-continued exertions, both in masters and servants, these behaviors being very good in keeping my 11th commandment, thou shalt not be idle.
Wait, what's a crockery?
I think it's like cookware.
Okay, like a crock pot?
Yeah, like a kind of like a crock pot, but more like the same ceramic-y kind of thing that you can put into the oven.
We'll look it up later.
Yeah, we'll put in the footnotes if we were wrong, because we might be wrong. This period of sweat and ambition generated several technologies that ultimately improved living conditions for millions. But it also so firmly entrenched the idea that it is the inevitable lot of humankind to labor in servitude to development and expansion, that previous attitudes towards work were effectively lost. Given how many of us feel like we might have had enough development and expansion for the time being, thank you very much, your authors figure that some of those older attitudes might be worth revisiting. Traveling first to the times of our hunter-gatherer forebears, we find them largely without words for work. Criminy! Does this indicate a life of such incessant toil that no other state was imaginable? Not at all. Mid-20th century studies of hunter-gatherer groups living in a traditional manner put their average work day, that is, taking care of necessary tasks, at under 5 hours. Many of these tasks were also social and playful, and so probably felt far removed from wage-slave drudgery. Most pre-modern societies seem to have had no word for work either. The ancient Greeks didn't, and so could speak of work only in the negative. When Aristotle is quoted as having observed that we work in order to achieve leisure, what he actually wrote was closer to this: we are unleisurely in order to achieve leisure. Either translation suggests that work itself was not viewed as a thing of much intrinsic value in ancient Greece. One modern stigma around eschewing work is its association with the ludicrously privileged aristocracy of the old European class system. Yet the medieval lower classes seemed no more ideologically driven to less than necessary work than gentry. While toil was certainly hard and long in areas where agricultural conditions or your feudal lords were tough, there are also indications that peasant life could be quite a romp. Records from 15th century France, for example, show that an average of 1 day out of every 4 was an official holiday, frequently of a kind that meant carnival and revelries for the peasantry. In Essex in the 14th century, Casual laborers are estimated to have worked no more than 120 days a year, and not for lack of opportunity. Barbara Emmerich writes in Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy, that the period from the 13th to the 15th century can be seen as one long outdoor party punctuated by bouts of hard labor. The artisan classes appear also to have been free of any moral compunction towards non-essential labor, a fact distressing to more pious types as the cogs of the industrial age got grinding. John Houghton, a commentator on trade, bemoaned in 1681 the lack of labor put in by knitters and makers of silk stockings as soon as they had a great price for their work, and described them as spending most of their time at the alehouse or ninepins as long as they have a penny of money. Do you think ninepins is bowling?
Yeah.
Wow, bowling goes back to 1681?
No, ninepins does.
Oh, that's fun. Let's stop there and rest our reeling heads. We don't know about you, but your authors actually go a bit wonky over the concept of doing just enough paid work to pay for basic needs, and then treating time as a malleable substance to be shaped, even aimlessly squandered, as we please. We struggle to untether ourselves from the idea that ongoing achievement is essential for a worthwhile life. But what if it's not? Our flit through history hints that achievement could be an overrated, relatively modern habit. Maybe it would be just fine to spend much, much more time looking around at the world, going cross-country orienteering through our own fascinating minds, and enjoying those of other humans. Beloved reader, we are the first to admit that some work feels like a marvelous use of time. We have earned money doing many truly rewarding things. Things where we were stimulated by learning and thinking, meeting riveting people, creating stuff we were proud of, journeying to unusual locations. But we don't think that anyone should spend most of life working without questioning the whole equation first. So we suggest taking a step back from the blackboard, the better to view the tales from history chalked up there for your rumination. Put yourself in a cocktail shaker with them and mix their globules up with your globules, then have a ponder. I love how they write this book. Here's a few bonuses of working less. Even if you love your work, you will probably love it even more if you don't feel hedged into doing it X hours a week, X weeks a year, ad infinitum. If you don't love your work, reducing your hours can allow you to appreciate its good bits, sociability, or the way it keeps you fit or takes you to places that you wouldn't otherwise go. Even a job you thought you hated can sometimes become enjoyable when you do it less. You actually didn't hate the job, but how much it dominated your life. Working less almost always saves you money. You might spend less on work-related expenses, transport, clothes that you don't wear anywhere else. Rudy's going to join us for the end of this because he's dancing around on the floor. So now he's up in Jesse's arms. Clothes that you don't wear anywhere else, an up-to-the-minute iPad you feel you can't do without. You might spend less on de-stressing, yoga classes, remedial alcohol, or therapy bills. You might be able to give up some busyness enablers like frequent takeaway food, time-saving appliances, or even a car. Of course, whittling down your working life isn't always as straightforward as asking for fewer shifts per week. For some people, it will require serious life overhauls, restructuring or job sharing your role, volunteering for a demotion, or changing careers. If you are fettered by serious mortgage or car repayments, it might mean moving to a smaller house or to an area with better public transport.
Well, I was actually thinking, based off of last Friday's Frugal Friday, and how they were mentioning the sci-fi thing of how people worked less and made instruments to make it easier to work less, but then ended up just filling their days with other things. And so I was wondering what it might have looked like back in the day. How much time did they spend working? Did they spend more time working because it took longer to mend your socks and do some of the things that we just go to the store and buy now? Or it sounds like they spent less time, based on this study at least. So here, you take Rudy.
Rudy's such a mess in this video.
Whoa.
Oh gosh, Rudy. Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay.
All right.
Give your dog a hug, everyone.
So, yeah, so I was interesting to see that they were working about 5 hours a day, and now we're up to 8 hours a day or more for a
But
lot
they
of
said
people.
even 5 hours a day, and that was including like life stuff. Like it was 5 hours a day of like taking care of their basic needs. So that would be like gathering and preparing food, and because we're talking like hunter-gatherer times. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be like hunting, killing the animals, skinning the animals, cleaning up their little homes, whatever people did back in hunter-gatherer times, move camp, etc. That was like 5 hours of cumulative time a day. So if you think about that, like you have actual labor that you're doing for someone else, and then you have all of the labor that it takes to support your life,
Yeah,
like
right.
taking the car in for an oil change, or vacuuming the floor, or scheduling your appointments, or emptying the dishwasher and loading the dishwasher and emptying the dishwasher and loading the dishwasher and emptying the dishwasher.
Stop eating so much. Yeah, so that's interesting. The idea of living off grid and living in a tiny house and not dealing with society's way of living and working and all that stuff has always been interesting. I wonder how much of it's interesting versus actually would be enjoyable once doing it. Um, but yeah, I can imagine if you didn't have, if all you were doing was meeting your basic needs, you'd have a lot more time on your hands. So would you
Yeah.
get bored?
I mean, I don't think you could get bored. Like, I feel like you'd be, I mean, I feel like I'd find ways to be busy, as we all know. I'm good at doing that. But, if you've got a garden and animals to care for because you're trying to live off the land, and if you're trading and bartering and maybe creating something that you can sell at a market so that you can get some money to buy some fruits that you don't have access to on your own homestead, and then, if you're biking everywhere, that takes time. I mean, during the few months that I was truly off of work last fall, I found things to do every day, but it was a different pace. It would take me 2 hours to go to the library and back because I would walk to the library, I would get my books, I would load them up, I might stop by the store on the way home, and then I would walk back home. And so going to the library was like, oh man, it's going to take me 2 hours to get there, but I was also getting fresh air and exercise, and I had a little bit of a social interaction on the way. And so I think, if you found a way to kind of exit this rat race that we're all in, so to speak, you would find things to do because you would intentionally slow down in certain areas, and it naturally takes you longer to do things if you're not choosing all of the more expensive, convenient, modern ways of doing
Yeah.
stuff.
So why do you think we now feel the need to be hyper productive? Why do you think? Like, part of me, and I'm by no means hyper productive type of person even, but part of me kind of gets bummed out with myself if I take a day and I don't do a whole lot, and then like time is the one thing that we can't really get back. So I think maybe we need to learn how to focus our time on what we want to and understand better what it is that we enjoy doing and how we can enjoy our life more rather than um, focusing our time on getting more stuff done.
I know for me, if I have a day where I'm having a down day but I'm not intentional about it, I tend to feel pretty bummed out. Like if I've just laid around and like the dishes have piled up and like I haven't taken care of the house, or I haven't gone for a walk and gotten some fresh air, and I've just like zoned out watching Netflix or something, I do tend to find that that's a different experience than like intentionally choosing to go out and sit, outside with a nice warm cup of tea and a blanket and read a book, or even watch a Netflix show, but in between that, like just throw some clothes in the dryer and maybe stretch my body and like feel physically connected to the experience. And I think that's another thing. I mean, I think so many of us are engaged in lives that we're maybe not finding meaningful or intentional, or maybe we're finding them stressful, and all we want to do is like find a way to like zone out, right? And so we choose to do that through these unintentional ways of binge watching shows or watching or playing video games or whatever it is that we're doing to kind of numb out, as opposed to intentionally choosing to be less engaged and less productive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I think our society definitely has us trained to think a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard one to break, I think, for some people.
I think we're all living in productivity culture. Like, we're units of productivity in the society that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of ourselves that way sometimes. We think of ourselves as human doings rather than human beings.
Yeah.
And we live in a society that heavily rewards people who are hyper productive and looks down upon and others, people who choose to live their lives in a slower, less productive fashion. And I think a good first step is simply acknowledging that that's the case, you know?
Sure, yeah. Interesting. Well, we'd love to hear from you guys about stuff that you guys might be dealing with or working through in this regard, and maybe how you've dealt with it, or whether you don't give a rat's toot. What they call
No,
it?
it's a goose's toot.
Oh, it's a goose's toot.
It was a rat's belly button.
Okay, a rat's belly button and a goose's toot about society and their, ways of doing things, or maybe you're, stuck in that mindset and having a hard time getting out of it like the rest of us. So, comment down below. We'd love to hear from you guys. We appreciate all of you watching these videos, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.